Health Organization's failures, Democrats continue to play defense for America's foes. Joining me now for reaction, Senator Tom Cotton of my home state of Arkansas. Senator, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Good evening, Governor. Good to be on with you.
I want you to outline, you and Dan Crenshaw have put together a package of legislation that would give Americans some very special rights when it comes to holding China accountable. How would it work?
Well, Governor, typically foreign officials are immune from lawsuits in our federal court system. Sovereign immunity is a principle in the international system going back hundreds of years, but it's not absolute. We've waived it, for instance, for the victims of the 9/11 terror attacks. Congressman Crenshaw and I think we should waive it for the victims of this terrible virus, because the Chinese officials lied about the nature of this virus. They intentionally allowed this virus to escape outside their borders, to level the playing field with the rest of the world so they would not suffer all of these harms alone. They ought to pay the consequences. Now, that's just the first step. There's a lot of other things we can do. I have legislation with Congressman Mike Gallagher to bring back pharmaceutical manufacturing from China to the United States. We've got legislation out this week that will invest a lot more in our military to deter Chinese aggression in the Western Pacific. But one immediate thing we could do is open our courts up to the Americans who have been so grievously harmed by this virus.
If that were to happen, I mean, what's the likelihood that the Chinese would even respond to a lawsuit? And if they just thumb their nose, then what do we do?
Yeah, well, in a lot of occasions they probably won't, but there are consequences for that as well. Default judgments can be entered, assets can be seized. It can put difficulty on them traveling or coming to the United States. So there are going to be serious consequences if our legislation passes and Chinese officials refuse to even respond to those lawsuits. Our legislation will also allow China to fess up, come forward with what they did, create a pool of money from which people could recover, as we also did for the 9/11 victims, and then we would turn off that waiver of sovereign immunity. Let's just say that I don't expect Communist China to do that, and therefore it's important that we open up our courts to the American people to sue the Chinese officials who are responsible for unleashing this pandemic on the world.
Senator, it would seem like that this should be such an easy bipartisan lift for the members of Congress, House and Senate, Republican and Democrat. Why aren't the Democrats joining with you to hold the Chinese communists accountable for this? And I'm not trying to be partisan. I honestly want to know, you rub shoulders with them all day, what are they thinking? Why aren't they saying, that's great, let's go after them?
Yeah, well, I hope they will, Governor. In some cases in the past, I've worked together pretty well with, for instance, Chuck Schumer on the issues related to China. Maybe the only time we've worked together on legislation. So I do expect some Democrats will join us, but unfortunately, some in the Democratic Party, some in the media, basically want to take the side of anyone Donald Trump is opposed to. And President Trump has made it clear that he says China is responsible for this virus. Or, for example, as you said, he's made it clear that Tedros at the World Health Organization badly erred and probably was just spinning for China. And what do you have? You have Democrats in the media rushing to the defense of the World Health Organization. So I think there's some, in this issue, there's some simply knee-jerk reflexive opposition to President Trump, even as is so often the case, he's on the right side of this issue.
We were seeing you throw some flags way back in January about the potential harm of this. A lot of people didn't take you seriously then. Do you feel a little vindicated? And by the same token, what did you see that the rest of America just flat didn't see back then?
No, Governor, it's hard to say one can feel vindicated or feel good about foreseeing all this when we have over 50,000 Americans who have died and 27 million Americans who have lost their livelihoods. That's not the thing about which one wishes to be proven right. But looking back in January, when the rest of Washington was obsessed about the impeachment trial, I saw the contrast between Chinese rhetoric on the one hand that tried to say everything was calm and under control and this virus couldn't pass from human to human when they knew that it was highly contagious and even lethal, versus Chinese action, which reflected that knowledge. They shut down schools in all of mainland China. They literally welded the door shut on apartment buildings in Wuhan. They shut down air travel to Hong Kong, which they otherwise would never do. So the contrast between their lying rhetoric and their drastic extreme action told me that this virus had the potential to be a deadly pandemic.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Senator. Great to see you.